Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I am your host and virtual voice coach, Darcy D. And today we are going to discuss the practice of practice. We've had a lot of requests for this topic. So one question I get asked often is, how do I practice, or what should I practice? Now, the answer you would think is simple. One should practice exercise or songs. But in order to maximize the benefits of practice, we must first determine a few things. So I thought I'd begin by, sharing what the definitions of practice are. So practice, the noun, the actual application or use of an idea, belief, or in this case, method, as opposed to theories relating to it. So the principles and practice of teaching, for example, that's something that I do. And then the verb, which is something that my clients do, is to perform an activity or exercise, a skill, repeated or regularly in order to improve or maintain one's proficiency. So it's something that we all have to do in order to develop the voice that we want. And it's the practice of practice that certainly is the challenge for a lot of us. Now, this isn't an aha moment for you. You all know what practice is. We practice all kinds of things daily. But I'd like to unpack the concepts of practice as it pertains to how we as singers use our voices. How do you practice what you practice when you practice what you practice? You may have to practicing at first to improve your practice. So practice is the necessary evil, if you will, for growth and improvement or advancement. As it pertains to singers, it builds muscle memory or reroutes muscle memory so the skills every singer needs can be established, developed, and grown. For example, when you hear a singer that moves you, that has the ability to make you feel the lyrics they're singing. They bring you to tears and you start swallowing hamburgers. It can make you want to pump your fist in the air, or they can find and punch out big high notes, solid notes, and they can also sing so subtly that they make you lean in and hang on every word. Like singers that can riff and run quickly and confidently, that the only response you can offer is, wow. I mean, what you could say is these are all signs of a singer who is disciplined. Disciplined in the art of practice, in rehearsal, in knowledge of and usage of, the application of the voice into scales. They've spent time learning, first the scales and exercises. They've perfected them so they can execute them faster and cleaner. And then they were able to identify with the emotional value of the lyrical content. And with the habits they've created in all of these areas, we're able to deliver a message so strong that you can't help but believe them. What do singers do? They sing. And what do singers sing? They sing songs. So what is a song? A song is a story. And then you ask, whose story is it? And it is the one who sings it. It's your story. Whether it's a cover song or something you've written, it is your story, and it's your interpretation of what those lyrics mean that moment in time. It's like an audio snapshot of an event or a situation. And the more that you can relate to that story or situation, the more, using all the tools you do in practice or you build in practice, you'll be able to tell that story. So on a side note, I get asked all the time, from singers, what songs should I sing or what song should I sing? And my response is always, any song to which you can relate or identify with the message, one that you believe in. Because if you can support the meaning of the lyrics of the song, then you will be able to eventually, do the song justice, tell the story, and emote or emotionalize correctly the message of the song. And I suppose why I'm getting into all this is because it's more than just, exercises and doing the things that help develop our voice, but then the ultimate goal for every exerciser is to become a balanced singer and tell stories and relay messages. So then there's other things, other topics that we'd have to sort of unpack and, start to build. You have to put on your actor's hat, for example. You have to be able to, feel what the song is about, use the prosody of the song to direct the message. And that in turn will tell your brain, hey, this is how I feel about this. This is how I might look about this. This is how I will sound when I tell this story. But let's pump the brakes just for a bit here. If being a singer is the end result, singing songs, telling stories, relating a message or a cause, then the end result is the finished product, right? So everything that we do, everything we want to become, and I talk about this with singers all the time, when we're emulating artists or songs, we're emulating the finished product. It's been, mixed and mastered, and there's compression and effects, and every note is right in place, and we're trying to acoustically emulate that, the finished product. How do we get to that finished product? So, would you agree that that singers want to sing songs? I mean, isn't that why we do what we do? Like, no one ever begins taking voice lessons to exercise. They'd be like, ooh, this I don't want to spend all my time exercising. But the truth, singing songs is more rehearsal than practice. Singing is where you put to use all the things you've practiced to enable you to get through a song into a performance. So now, just as there are different levels of practice, there are also different levels of performance. So, we could classify them as beginner, novice, semi-pro, professional, because certainly the way a professional singer rehearses or practices is going to be different than a beginner. How a beginner practices or even looks at the logic of exercise. Because it usually takes a while for you to understand, how the voice works, why the voice works. And then there's usually that moment where you go, I just realized that I didn't know all these things about the voice or how I apply these things to the voice. Whereas a novice might go, okay, yeah, I get it. I have to do this silly, dorky exercise to the point of boredom. And then boredom, it would be the sign that it's time to step up the exercise, to advance the exercise to something more challenging, something more coordinated, building the principles of all the concentrations that we focus on as singers. And then, advancing. Whereas the semi-pro or the professional singer, is faithful and diligent in warming up before exercise, warming up before a performance, knowing when to back off, when they can press down, when they can, go a little deeper or push their voice a little more because they've built up the resistance principles of that, for example. Making sense, everyone? Okay. Because at some point throughout your practice era, you are going to perform. You're going to perform in the shower, in front of your family and friends, in a coffee shop, a theater, or you at a concert hall, which is the dream. So the practice required varies for every level of performance. So for the beginners, it's not impossible, but it's impractical to think that you're going to be able to sing at a level of the semi-pro or the professional singer that's preparing for a performance in a concert hall. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different game. You have to be aware of where you are in your vocal development journey, right? You have to listen to your body. I know I've been saying that a lot lately. Listen to your body, what it's telling you when you're practicing. Have you pushed it too far? Because with the voice, unlike, building the bicep, no pain, no gain. You get pain, you will have no gain. in the voice. So you cannot push it to the point where it's going to be stressed or strained. So your practice required for every level is different. We're going to practice to find notes and dexterity at first. We're going to be learning the scales. That is going to be the practice. We're going to be learning the scales, using the scales then in vocal routines. So you can't complete a routine until you can do all the scales, right? So so if you're the person that just wants to get in there and get it done, you're going to skip ahead, you're going to move forward, you might be, inhibiting your growth by not digesting and really creating the muscle memory and habits of the skill of exercise into scales and vocal routines. So then you can build and balance the voice and then transition into song using all the concentrations you've built to tell stories. So, and these stories, of course, are sustained speech form stories, where the song falls apart or goes sideways, you can use scales you already know to erase the challenge in the song. And then, so you see what I'm getting at here? There's the stages. Who should practice? Anyone who wants to better their skills. Anyone who is using their voice in this case. And at first, you have to practice to practice. We all need to become persistent practicers, expert exercisers, and then you have to start selecting the exercises that are going to work best for you and your voice type, and repeat them correctly again and again, and again and again, and again and again and again and again. I can't overstress that. I've been singing, most of my life, and I still do the same exercises. There's some that I prefer because I really understand they're just a part of my being now. They're very subconscious. They're tools in my belt. And there's others that I will work on when I want to, challenge myself. So you have to select the exercises that work best for you and repeat them correctly, right? And what'll happen is instead of just getting through the exercise, we're going to try different volumes. Maybe softly, maybe a little bit more aggressively to build your dynamic approach. Sing head voice notes connected and in falsetto. Sing chest voice notes connected and in falsetto or lighter. And sometimes that confuses people because they go, well, isn't falsetto head voice? But falsetto is that disconnected flute-like sound that we can also do in a chest voice position. If those vocal cords in their closing, in the vibration pattern, if they're closing softer, we have more breath flow than connection, we're going to get a falsetto-like sound. So this is my transition. So this would be mixed tone for me. This would be chest voice. So obviously connected. If I release the grip of the closing or the adduction of the vocal folds, that's not head voice. That is a very lightly, almost disconnected sound, flute-like sound in chest voice, right? So there's different levels of resistance, if you will, that we now look at, and these are things that we're going to have to do to build in your voice the ability to be dynamic, right? And the ability to connect and or release. So in exercise, we never really want to go into falsetto because we're always looking to build a connected tone and in a balanced way throughout the working part of your register. So the exercises you learn should and will become the tools in your belt that you can access whenever you need them to fix a part in a song, to create more volume, intensity, dynamics, or emotional value. So we practice exercises and we practice so that we can do the exercise. Then the exercise does what it's designed to do. And then we can look at taking everything we know and perhaps putting it into song. In order for a practice routine to be effective, you need to first determine what your voice lacks. What is out of balance? Is it the pitch? Are you straining? Is it a little too weak? Is it hoarse? Is there lack of sufficient breath flow? Is my timing off? What is causing the imbalance in your vocal performance, whether it's in exercise or in song? So if you're a beginner, start at the beginning Get an understanding of what the voice is and how it works. Do the vocal analysis to determine what voice type you are, what your tends to is. And if you're not sure about that, send a little video in of you singing the 5-tone ah, and I'll let you know what I'm hearing and what voice type I think you are. Then you're going to go into the routine for that voice type, and you're going to apply the exercises that will facilitate the results. This may mean that you first have to learn the exercises. You learn the exercise so the exercise can do what it's designed to do. So, beginners might find that learning the exercises is difficult at first, because it can be. We're expected to be, singing in a very disciplined fashion, although the scale might sound easy, as some of you may have found out in the deep practice exercises, that, it can be difficult because our body and our voice and the muscles that control the vocal cords are not accustomed to going and singing those notes in that fashion. But everything you do supports everything you do. So once you've learned an exercise, then you can practice the exercise, and the correct repetition will build and balance your voice and set you up for more complicated exercises. When should I practice? Should I practice daily, weekly, monthly, and at what frequency? When you practice, even once a day is beneficial. Just like bodybuilders, there really isn't a bad workout. And the keeners, be careful not to over-practice, because you can over-practice and fatigue your voice. I recommend the 10 to 15 minute practice sessions. Your practice should have intent. It should be deliberate, intentional, purpose-driven routine. If at any point in your routine you feel you may not be doing it correctly, or you feel something's going on with your body, or you can hear that the notes aren't quite secure, or something's off, that's a sign to stop and take a break. Walk away from it, go finish the dishes, come back, and come back to it again, right? So listen to your body, listen to your voice. If the struggle is real, pump the brakes, right? Putting practice time into your schedule will ensure that your goals are met eventually. So you know that you need to practice. You may know that you've done the vocal analysis, so you know what voice type you are, so you know the scales that you might be needing to apply. Learn the scales, practice the scales, and then when you put the right exercises together in said routine, that routine will give you the balanced exercises, like a salad. We have all the right ingredients in that routine to combat your tends to. Make sense? Sense will be made. Where should you practice? And that seems like a silly question, right? Because where should you practice? But for some people, especially people starting out or just beginning to dig into the art and science of building a voice, you have to make mistakes. And when you make mistakes, you don't sound good. And let's face it, in general, vocal exercises don't sound good until we're at the point where we're starting to stylize and put our flair into the song. So having a space where you feel safe in is a benefit. It's a benefit to any singer. And if you're self-conscious, this is important because you want to be able to make noise without inhibition. More often than not, and certainly in the beginning, your practice will not sound good. Remember, you are not performing yet, so you want to be in a space that allows you to make those mistakes, take the chances, and build and balance your voice. So that might be that if you're in a place where you share, with your family or loved ones, and you can't really make the noise, there are things that you can do. There's items on Amazon called, I think it's called the Vocal Box or the Vox Box. It's a thick styrofoam device that's kind of shaped like a face mask, and it goes over your nose and your mouth, and it's got vent holes in it, and you can shout into that thing, and no one will hear you. It's like soundproofing. So what that'll do for your exercise or your practice, you'll be less inhibited You won't choke when you have to apply more volume to go for sustained or bigger notes. So it's so important as singers that we allow ourselves to make mistakes and let the mistakes happen, because they will. I've worked with voice coaches that said, treat it like you're playing a baseball game. 3 strikes and you're out. You move on. So make the same mistake 3 times, stop, do something else. Revisit, reevaluate. You don't want that muscle memory to set in to create the bad habit, because then you're going to spend another week correcting that in the song or whatever it is that you're working on. So you will find that you'll have to work longer to rehabituate any bad habits you create. Thus, short, deliberate, intentional exercise will build muscle memory faster, right? Then the repetition of the correct process will enable your growth to more difficult exercises, building more balance, greater resistance values, right? So, but being able to do it easy and without directing it. You're just expecting that it's going to happen. So you'll have more competence, which means you will have more confidence. But just remember, do it short. It will be easier to reach your goals when you know it's only 10 to 15 minutes. Hey, that's the length of a few commercial ads on television. So if you think about it that way, that's not very long at all, right? And again, if you're doing the correct exercise, you've done the analysis, you know what your voice is doing, you're going to do 10 or 15 minutes after you've warmed up of exercise, then you can stop, right? And if you can do that 2 times a day, that's wonderful. If you can do it up to 6 times a day, that's rock star status, right? So maybe you set a deadline. I want to practice once a day for the next 30 days, right? You've set a deadline. That may motivate you to get it done, because then you can see, look, I did that. It was easy. Now I'm going to go for twice a day, right? And then you warm up, you practice, and cool down. And then you'll find you warm up a little bit slower in the morning, but in the afternoon it's going to be easier, right? And your voice will thank you for it. You've just practiced. And it wasn't because, I have to practice. Sometimes you're just going to do what you do. So we're going to practice our voice. Let's practice our feelings. Let's practice our emotions. Let's practice our pitch, rhythm, speed, our emphasis, right? And all these different things. The things that make up what we need to utilize to be singers, sustained speech storytellers. Why practice or force practice? And when I say force, I don't mean like push. I mean referring to having mentally force yourself to practice. Over time, you will begin to see these results of your practice efforts. Results will reverse the, I have to practice, to, wow, I get to practice. Because you know what you're doing over time is going to create the results that you need. Remember the patience process. You have to apply the work, but it doesn't have to be for hours. And then slowly but surely, you're going to see the results or the fruit of your labor in 15 minutes of practice. If you're doing the correct exercises, you have the right prescription or routine, you will feel and hear the results, and that leads to more of a willingness to practice. Knowing that it can't be forced, that it simply has to be done as correctly as possible to develop good habits and strong muscle memory, then again, you'll find that you want to practice. So how should we practice? Again, depends on the tends to, and that is a moving target. Beginners or singers new to training the voice, I would suggest doing the 5-tone awe scale every so often. The initial voice type tends to can change as you begin to get a handle on your concentrations. You have to apply the understanding and the logic behind why you're doing what you're doing, and then you have to sort of reevaluate and maybe even record yourself and listen back. Am I getting the results that are demonstrated in the app? Or am I getting the result? Can I feel and hear the difference? And if I can't, I need to go back. So scales first, then exercise workouts which utilize the scales you've learned. And if you happen to be getting bored with your practice, which Some people do. You get bored. It's like, oh, I've done this a million times, right? You could challenge yourself by changing the resistance value, turning the volume up for half the scale. You know, the top half of the scale, the bottom half of the scale, right? So now you're getting more dynamic. Record yourself singing the scale if you are bored and listen back to it. Are you getting every note? Does the vowel stay pure as you ascend and descend? So if we're trying to say an ah vowel, ah, does it go to ah on the top? Keep it ah. How do you do that? So you're gonna have to probably play with one of your concentrations. I would suggest a lowered larynx. Ah, and you'll go. Right? So the vowels have to be pure. As pure as possible. The exception is, of course, any pop music. Is the transition intact? Right? Do you get to that concentration area where you've had to build a bridge? Does it stay intact when you do these exercises as you ascend through the transition and descend through the transition? Or do you struggle to stabilize? Because if you're struggling, that means you should not be bored with this exercise yet. Is there ease and presence in the sound? You know, does it sound splatted the whole time? Ah, you know, then there's you still haven't exercised to the point of where you're beginning to stylize it, right? You need to be able to do the sustain and to press down, to release without the let go. So you must have that ease and presence. And lastly, but certainly not least, but one of the major things that we look for in a voice is vibrato. And why do we look for vibrato? Vibrato is the badge of maturity. If you can add vibrato to any note of your scale while you exercise, that means you have balance. Balance between vocal cord closure and breath flow. Balance between the sound made at the vocal cords and the vowels you're shaping. If you can get vibrato, if you can add and subtract vibrato, because vibrato is going to be very much fed by emotional value. So if you understand the lyric, and that's why it's probably difficult to put that on exercise, or it can be difficult to put vibrato on exercise, because there's no emotional value attached to it. Easy in the love song. So perhaps you'll have to zero in on one aspect of whatever it is you're practicing and then speed it up. So if you're bored, slow it down, speed it up, slow it down, speed it up. Go into deep practice exercises, go into the exercise toolbox. And if you can navigate all those exercises through your vocal register, ascending and descending, maybe you are bored because you're doing very, 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 very well. Be open to it. Make mistakes and take the risks. But short practice won't build bad habits. If you ever have any questions about your practice, how you practice, why you practice, when you practice, or anything related to your practice, I am always here, as you know, in the chat, in the community. I truly hope this has answered your questions with respect to, why we practice, what we practice, how we practice, when we practice, where we practice. And thank you all once again. We will see you soon. See you out there. All the best. Cheers.